Good morning, students. I am VAIBHAV BIST, Assistant Professor, Film Studies Department, UIFVA, Chandigarh University. And the subject which I am going to teach is Film Appreciation 1. First of all, warm welcome on the Blackboard sessions of the live lectures. And now, let us begin with a formal introduction of both the faculty and the subject. First, the faculty. As I have already told you, my name is VAIBHAV BIST and I am having 8 years of industry working experience. I have made films, I have made web series, and I have made 25 short films till date also, out of which 5 are award winnings. So I have an experience to share with you all. And now, coming back to the subject, already mentioned, the subject name is Film Appreciation 1. And the course of this subject is designed to give an introduction to you all to global cinema, to introduce you all to global cinema. Not just Indian cinema, but to international cinema. Because see, when you go and watch a film, when you go and watch a film, it can be good or bad, but how do you analyze it? How do you appreciate it? So that when you go back home and tell your friends or tell your family members to watch that film or not to watch that film, but on what points? This course will put light on those points. Film appreciation or film review, you can say any name. And by the end of this course, you would have gained knowledge about Indian and global cinema. You would have gained knowledge about various filmmaker styles of filmmaking, shot taking, and you would have gained knowledge about writing film reviews, both as a critic and as an audience. Now coming on to some basic course information. The course for Film Appreciation 1 is divided into 3 units. First unit will cover 4 practicals that will require 6 weeks time, or you can say 12 hours time. And second unit will also cover 3 practicals that will again require 6 weeks time or 12 hours time. And then finally third unit will cover 3 practicals that will require 4 weeks time or 6 hours time. So a total of 30 hours that will be needed to cover the 10 practicals of Film Appreciation 1. Now the course objective of the subject. Students will learn about how to watch a film according to a filmmaker's perspective, with special emphasis on film's grammar, making technique, and the various steps used in filmmaking. Now I talk about what can be various course outcomes. So here, learning to view the film as a maker and not just as an audience, learning to study, understood research and criticize. Students will learn about other associative media arts form related for proper understanding of a film. Student will start understanding and different treatment style required for different genres of a film and distinguish them thematically. Okay, so here is the experiment number 1. Watch an international film from early cinema era and discuss about its filmmaking style. So our film for the experiment number 1 is Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Year of release 1920, directed by Robert Wien. Camera was done by Willy Hemister. Country of release was Germany, starring Werner Krauss, Conrad Veidt. Running time was 74 minutes. Here you can see the poster of the film with the Google link has been also given to search the image. And now we come on to review the film. Now when you see the film, just watch the entire film and you will witness that it's really a very wonderful film. A very dark thriller, made during the times when the technology was not so great to make the film. But still Robert Wien did very fantastic job. And when you review the film, you will notice that, warped in all senses, fascinating and bizarre. Robert Wien just laid down a template for today's scary movies, neo-noirs and psychological thrillers. And it is topped off with a surprise ending that still gets used all the time now. With all the weird gapping and girding and the distorted perspective of its expressionist sets, Caligari is a nightmarish cinematic extension of Bram Stoker's classic film Dracula. Now, Werner Cross plays Dr. Caligari, a mysterious showman who comes to a small German flair with his coffin-sized cabinet containing the corpse-like figure, Caesar, played by young Connor Wade, later to play Major Stresser in Casablanca. Caligari says that this wraith is a somnambulist, people who walk in sleep. From birth, he has never woken up, and this lifelong trance gives him the power to predict the future of any audience member. Horrors ensue, and Caligari and his cabinet spread panic. The film draws on the eerie, occult experience of early cinema itself, whose flickering, ghostly images such as Caligari's cabinet, all the kinds of fashionable, table rapping and fortune telling were often to be presented in fairground tents. Caligari is a crazy black mass on its own, a mute opera of fear. Being a silent film, it's a masterpiece, I would say, of silent horror genres. It virtually cornered the market on the concept of disorienting. Robert Wien Caligari, of course, is a landmark of silent cinema. Filmed when Germany was suffering a severe shortage of right angles, it is chock full of squeaked windows, crooked doors, and warped walkways, not to mention freakishly made-up characters. Mr. Fisher has scanned the original backgrounds from an old print, and through some kind of green screen magic put living, speaking actors into them. They tell a fleshed out version of the original story written by Mr. Fisher. And remember, it's almost 100 years old film, and still it will manage to, spook you. The disorientation begins the first time an actor speaks. So ingrained are the silent expressionist images of the original that is jarring to hear voices. It's doubly jarring that the resulting dialogue sounds very 21st century. Even as the makeup is recreating the 1990 look, it is just the circuit overload. Very wonderful film. So these are the outcome of the practical. This is a German expressionism film. Chiaroscuro lighting was used in the film to showcase thrill in some scenes. The film theme was all dark and shadows were used deliberately to produce horror. Post World War I defeat, German filmmakers used to make films that were dark in themes to indicate their low in spirit mood after the war defeat. With limited resources, still Robert Wien managed to create a masterpiece of German expressionism theory. Okay, here one word that I used while I was reviewing the film Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is German expressionism. Yes, indeed, it's a German expressionist film. Now, what exactly is German expressionism? You need to know this word before you actually review this film. See, post World War I, Germany was heavily defeated by the Allied forces, and there was a sense of dejectedness, low in spiritness that prevailed among the Germans. So the filmmakers of that era, they started making films, on dark themes. Their films just lacked the smile, the happiness, or the positiveness of the life, because they were very low in spirit. They were dejected after the defeat in the war. So this film, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, is a German expressionist film. Now, some traits of German expressionism films are that they used to use chiaroscuro lighting. What is chiaroscuro lighting? Is that suppose in this frame, this is my background, it will be dark and light will be just focused on me. Creating a light and dark effect. That is chiaroscuro lighting, and it is used in 90% of the scenes in the film. And again, German expressionist directors, they never used real locations. They always used sets. They used to create those sets. And then they used to do lighting on the set so that they create a stage-like feeling, theater-like feeling, or a stage-like feeling, dark theme, a very spooky type of set for their films. So now, when you review this film, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, as a critic, first of all, I would like to say that as a critic, it is very difficult to judge this film because, see, again, I would have to say that 100 years ago, the technology was not available to make the film in a more advanced way. Still, Robert Wynn did a very fantastic job. So as a critic, it is very difficult to judge this film. I will review it as an audience. So as an audience, I would like to say to all my colleagues, all my friends, all my family members to watch this film. Because it being a silent film, still it will manage to touch you. Still it will manage to spook you. It is an exceptional film. You know, a doctor using a somnambulist who walks in sleep for taking revenge from his enemies is a very wonderful idea. This idea will work even in today's times. If someone will remake this film, I am 100% sure it will work. So again, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, had all those elements in it that a spooky film or a dark theme film or a thriller film needs to work. Now I'm also including a video that will explain the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari film in a more simpler manner. Here's the video.
Today we are going to be beginning our discussion of 5-star plus movies. Now a 5-star plus movie isn't just a good movie, and it isn't just a great movie, it's a movie that makes you stand in awe because of how incredible the art of filmmaking can be. A 5-star plus film is one that has left its mark on the film industry, one that when you look at the modern day movie, these are the reasons that it's there today. I'd like to make one of these movies every month as we look at the best that cinema has to offer. First film we are going to be looking at is a very surreal German expressionistic film called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Now this is a fantastic early horror film that was released in 1919. So I will be discussing spoilers, but seeing as this film is nearly 100 years old, if you haven't seen it now, I think it's the time to do so. So without further ado, let's look at the magic that is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The film officially begins when we see these two men talking. Now one of them we are soon going to find out is named Francis, and he is going to be our main character. The other is just a man who he's able to tell his story to. All of a sudden, a ghostly figure appears, and Francis tells the other that that woman is his wife, and he begins to tell the story of how she became the way that she did. Let's take a moment to appreciate that this is a non-linear narrative released in 1919. 22 years before Citizen Kane and 75 years before Pulp Fiction, which are both two films that are known for innovating the non-linear style, but this did it long before either of these were around. The film cuts to the town where one of the men grew up, and we see this incredible backdrop. This is probably what the film is best known for. These vivid and surreal images that really show that you're living in a world with different rules. You're not looking at Germany, you're looking at something very different. And the choice of backgrounds helped make this movie so much better. Shadows were colored in, and everything that you're seeing was hand-drawn. It really shows that this is the art of filmmaking. The background also shows the oppression of the German regime. All of the houses are built on a hill, with the castle on top of it, showing the oppression of the common folk by those in charge and those with wealth. We are introduced to really our main antagonist, Dr. Caligari, and what this film did so well was use this film to tell the story. Instead of describing an evil man, you can actually see him. And this is really the first time that cinema as an art was able to show not only art, but also storytelling. This shot in particular reminds me of a Dr. Seuss drawing. Now, albeit, this is the scariest Dr. Seuss drawing out there, but you see the man in power sitting on an unreasonably large chair, leaning over as he checks the public records, which are on a podium that has literal symbols on it. You don't need to be a genius to pick up some stereotypes about an oppressive regime. And knowing what we know about Germany between World War I and World War II, he may be saying something about the government. Later we find out that the town clerk has been killed. Obviously we know who the perpetrator is, and this tells us so much about Dr. Caligari. After the town clerk made him wait for only 3 minutes, he was killed. This shows that Dr. Caligari is not someone to be trifled with. At the fair, which is essentially a metaphor for consumerism, Dr. Caligari sets up his somnambulist and draws a remarkable crowd by telling about his creature. After hearing about the wonders of Caesar, we are finally told about him. He is 23 years old, who has been asleep for the past 23 years. We see the creature, and oh god, look at that haircut! Look, I get he's been asleep for 23 years, and this was 1919, but come on, a bowl cut? In all reality, however, I actually really love this shot. It shows the pride Dr. Caligari has for Caesar, and it almost looks paternal. This is Caligari's way of making money and killing his enemies, and it's all captured in this one shot. Caesar wakes up. In his 23 years of sleep, Caesar began to learn everything, present, past, and future. The people begin to ask questions, and this part really shows off human greed. Through wanting to obtain the impossible, like knowing how long you are live, you are ultimately ending your life. Later that night, we see our protagonist being murdered, and this is shown through the use of shadow. Obviously, the MPAA wasn't around in the 1920s, but there were some guidelines. This film was able to get around these guidelines by using shadow, which is very innovative. His friend, Francis, remembers what the prophecy was, and now the film is about to get good. Francis reports this theory to the law, but is still unsatisfied, and he decides to go after Caesar and eventually Caligari himself. The law catches up with Caligari and they question him, and he shows them that Caesar is still there and assures him that he has been asleep ever since the fair that day, and he will not rise without him. Anyway, but the murder is revealed by someone else, and Caligari is saved. At this point, Jane, the woman from earlier, meets Dr. Caligari, who shows her Caesar, who wakes up. And this is without a doubt one of my favorite scenes in the film. There is something so great about the way that Caligari and Caesar look at her as she runs away. It is so unsettling and so great. That combined with the great score shows off some excellent filmmaking. In our next scene, which is ultimately a collection of different clips that all happen at the same time, Francis is checking in to see what Dr. Caligari is doing, and he sees him with Caesar. The next part of the scene, however, shows Caesar breaking into Jane's house with his knife. This is so unsettling, so creepy, and one of my favorite scenes in horror history. One of people's biggest complaints with this movie is that you see very dry camera angles. Every shot is long, drawn out, and for the most part, almost stationary. But it works so well in this movie as you see Caesar approach the bed, knife in hand. You see someone lying there asleep, someone coming to murder her. There's nothing you can do about it as an audience member, and nothing anyone can do about it. I'm certain most people are familiar with dramatic irony that Shakespeare perfected, in which the audience knows something that the characters inside the play do not know. However, this is the best case of dramatic irony, when you are seeing someone about to be murdered and there's nothing you can do about it. As Caesar approaches the bed, you can just see how well the shot is framed. So well executed. Caesar raises the knife to kill, and yet he can't do it. Just like this film's source material, Dracula, Caligari falls in love with one of his victims and kidnaps her. And again, as they leave, you get this long shot signifying how there's nothing you can do to try and help her. Her family rushes in, they check the window and see Caesar taking Jane away, which is such an incredible shot. Caesar escapes, Jane's family catches up with her, and Caesar runs off into the dust. However, Caesar's reign of terror ends after he falls from a hill and dies. It revealed that the Caesar that we had been seeing earlier was one that Caligari kept and was actually a dummy. We find out Caligari is really the real mastermind behind all of this. Francis catches up with Caligari, and he knows that he's behind it. They chase each other, and Caligari runs into a mental asylum. This entire sequence is so well edited together, going back and forth between Caesar and Caligari and Francis and the police. It is really great filmmaking. Obviously, the standards for good editing and good filmmaking today have changed, but this is one of the pioneers of innovative editing. Instead of just seeing one clip, you're seeing a collection of clips all happening at the same time that are used to build up suspense and tone, and it is so well executed to get such an incredible film. Next, we see Francis follow Caligari to the asylum after he assumes Caligari may be a patient, before it is revealed that he's the director. Albeit, this isn't the most shocking twist. You were just introduced to this asylum minutes ago, and yet this is one of the earliest cases of a plot twist. This crazy old man may not be that crazy. He may be the director of a well-established insane asylum. Francis tells the other hospital employees what he found out, and Caligari is now under supervision. What I love about this film's final act is that it isn't so much a horror movie, but instead a detective story. We finally learn about the real Caligari, and this reveal is so great. You get the first dynamic or moving shot in this entire movie. You find out exactly what happened the entire time, but it also acts as a great social statement. You find out why Caligari works in the asylum, so we can find a victim to act as his personal murder tool. And whether or not the director intended it or not, it ended up being a great social statement because of what we now know about asylum and abuse. We get a great transition that goes to a flashback, so yes, this makes a flashback in a story that was told, to Caligari discovering Caesar for the first time. Caligari begins extensive research before setting his monster out on the town. And he begins to go crazy, and he sees demands all over the screen. Again, this is excellent editing. This is something that has never been done before in film, and yet we're seeing a combination of both what's happening in the real world, but also special effects that happen in post-production. Finally, we go back to Francis talking to the man from the beginning. However, this film does not end on a positive note. Jane is locked away in the asylum with Caesar. Only Caesar has had a total personality change. No longer is he a murdering psychopath, but instead someone who's lost and confused, playing with flowers in the asylum. But then we get the best plot twist of all. Francis might be insane, that he's locked in the asylum just like everyone else. And the film ends on an ambiguous note. So, was the director of the asylum Caligari, or did Francis dream it all up? We are never told, it's only up to us to guess. So, this is truly an excellent film. Is it a perfect movie? Well, you could definitely make an argument saying it is. However, undeniably, this is a very innovative movie. The director used color to show off time of day in similar locations, which although it wasn't the first time that this happened, it did it in such a great way. The film utilized some great editing techniques, some awesome dynamic shots, and is all around a truly excellent film. It's one of my favorite horror films out there, and definitely one you should watch this time of year.
So that's it, students. That's how we have concluded the experiment number 1. That was watching an international cinema from early cinema days. And the film was Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It was a German expressionist film released in 1920, directed by Robert Wien. So, one thing I would like to say to conclude this session is that, the early filmmakers, though they didn't had that type of technology that is available today, but still they managed to pull off some very real cinematic pieces, very real wonderful films. But how? Because in every era, be it 50 years from now, 100 years from now, or 100 years before, the grammar of saying the cinema would remain the same. That is, if you have a very tight script and you make the film from here, it will work with the audience. That's it. See you in the next session.